Welcome back to State and Local. I'm Anne-Marie Battistone, and you're watching Norfolk Public Access, continuing a series of interviews with candidates for town offices. My guest today is Jay Talerman, who is also running for moderator, along with the other two candidates that you will have seen or have already seen. Oh, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Now, tell me something. How long have you lived in Norfolk?
Since 1995.
And where were you before that?
Well, I lived in Somerville before that, but I grew up in Medfield, so I grew up in this area.
Oh, all right. Oh, I lived in Medfield as well for a while. I loved it there. Now, what could you tell us about your training?
Well, my training for moderator was my day job. I mean, I think my training follows a couple of different paths for moderator, but my day job is I'm a municipal attorney. I represent cities and towns. I've been doing it for about 15 years. I've probably represented about 100 cities and towns. Right now, my firm is town council to 15 towns.
Oh.
And I regularly work in all phases of municipal law. I work very closely with moderators and boards of selectmen. I help draft warrant articles. I go to town meetings. I've been to hundreds of town meetings and zoning board meetings and everything else. More local training is I've been on a number of boards in this town, so have to understand the pulse of Norfolk, which is the other part of the moderator's job. I've served, I think, probably for at least 10 years on a whole variety of other boards.
Where did you go to law school?
Boston College.
Now, how did you happen to get into municipal law? What was it about that?
I mean, I've always done kind of public interesty law, but it like many legal professions, I kind of fell into it. I joined a firm that had a strong municipal practice. I loved it. I was living on Martha's Vineyard at the time.
Oh. Huh.
And we represented a few of the towns down there, and then I took a job in Boston doing it. And
for the city of Boston?
No, for a law firm in Boston that represented a great number of towns. And then I formed a firm about 8 years ago with a few friends of mine who are also municipal lawyers, and we've built up a municipal
So you're the principal?
Practice. I am a principal in that firm.
Now, what were the other boards that you had been on here in?
Well, right now I'm on the Council on Aging. I'm the chairman. I have been for about 5 years. It's been terrific. We have a lot of fun. I'm also on the Conservation Commission currently. I'm an associate member. I'm a former chair of that commission. I've been on and off of that commission a few different times.
That's highly technical. I sat in a meeting once and I was just, oh my goodness. I guess I thought it had more to do with, nature and wildlife and that sort of thing. But
it does.
But it was all about.
It can be, and there's two technical parts to it. There's engineering and wetland science, which I know a little bit about, but I'm certainly not an engineer or a scientist. And we had members on the commission who were engineers. They were terrific, and scientists. And then there's the legal side, and I think I was asked to be on it because I understand the law as it applies to wetlands, so I was on it. And while I was on the Conservation Commission, I was asked to serve on the Community Preservation Committee as well, and did that for a couple of years. I've been on the Master Plan Committee.
What is that exactly?
Well, the Master Plan Committee is something that, backing up, by statute, a town has to adopt or is supposed to adopt a master plan every so many years. We had an old one. A master plan essentially gives you kind of a template of where you are in terms of land use and economic development, and where you want to be or where you expect to be in the future. So when I was asked to be on it, there was some concern that, well, maybe we haven't done this in a while, and Norfolk had grown a tremendous amount since it had been done. So working with a few other committee members, we kind of mapped out where we are, land use, economic development, and where we could be if certain objectives were met 10, 15 years out. So we had to analyze the land, analyze kind of economic trends and everything else like that, work with some professionals. And I think it's vitally important. It's something that doesn't get talked about too much, but it does kind of form a blueprint. So I was happy to work on that.
How far out is that supposed to go, that plan?
Well, you look into the future a little bit. I can't recall exactly how far we pushed it out, but we tried to look at it as far out as we could possibly perceive growth in the town, looking at various trends. And it's not even so much that you have a finite date on it as much as you make sure that the town is equipped or make recommendations so that the town can deal with the growth or non-growth as may be necessary in the future, and you try and develop tools and make recommendations along those lines. Master plan doesn't do anything in terms of passing bylaws or making rulings or anything else like that. It's just advisory. It's just, hey, here's our snapshot. It was a fun experience. It took us probably close to a year to come up with it at the end of the day, probably a little less than that, but it was a good,
Wow.
it was a good experience.
Now, you are deputy moderator.
I have for the last couple of years been appointed deputy moderator.
Now,
yeah.
Cece appointed you. Cece Van Tyne appointed you, or was?
Well, it's more of a nomination, and then town meeting ratifies
I meant to say that, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Now, what are the other duties of the moderator, in addition to obviously, conducting the town meeting?
Well, I mean, I think it's
you would-
90% the conducting of the town meeting. Certainly the advisory, the moderator also appoints the advisory board, which makes financial and other recommendations to town meeting.
But that is staggered, right? So that during your 1 year, I mean, you would come up for re-election every year. During that 1 year, there might be one person or...
Could be as
that-
low as one. It's generally 2 or 3, sometimes more, I suppose, depending upon where the
Yes,
terms
right.
rise and fall.
Right.
Yeah, so it is staggered. I see it as a lesser component of the moderator's duties.
Oh, well, yes.
Obviously, a moderator should be selecting people for the advisory board that are vested in issues in the town of Norfolk, that have good experience with financial matters, because most of their recommendations are with respect to municipal finances. But my view is that the moderator should stay away from the ebb and flow of what an advisory board should recommend, and should just appoint really good people, the best and the brightest, so to speak. And that's how I view that. I view the role of moderator as primarily 90% helping run town meeting.
Now, and then do you sit down with the advisory board? Well, you won't, because you won't be elected at that point, because the election is the 6th of May, and town meeting is a week later. So will Cece do that?
Well, there's been some discussion on that. Because Cece's not running for re-election, under the town's bylaw, there's kind of a pre-town meeting at which the moderator sits with all the various stakeholders, whether it's planning or finance committee or board of selectmen, the town administrator, probably the school committee.
All of those as well.
Well, and not so much as to discuss the merits of any bylaw, but to discuss how town meeting is going to go. Again, the moderator rarely takes a position on any particular article. They're just really discussing, well, what would be the next article? And is there going to be a presentation on that article? How long is it going to last? Who's going to make the motion? Things like that. So the moderator doesn't really get involved in what those articles say or what the merits of those are, but a moderator should be very familiar with them. And for that reason, I think that a moderator should be paying attention to what's happening at the planning board with zoning bylaws, the school committee with respect to that budget, the selectmen with respect to the great number of articles, and the advisory board with respect to what their recommendations may be.
Do you happen to know how those articles are numbered?
Right now?
No, not. But I mean, in general, how the numbers.
It's the
how they're-
selectmen's decision by law, always.
The order of the articles.
The selectmen determine the order of articles. Now, the town meeting has the power to move to take some of those articles out of order. It's rare that happens, and the moderator even has some say over that as well. But the selectmen choose the order of the articles. It's their warrant, so to speak, with the exception of articles that get petitioned on by 10 or 100 citizen petitions, but the selectmen still choose where those go in the warrant.
And do you know what affects that? How that's determined, or what's the...
In my experience, and I represent a lot of towns, I think everyone takes a different approach to it. Some towns, for an annual town meeting, they certainly like to do the budget up close to the start of meeting when people still have some energy.
Right.
It's a
Oh, yes, okay.
$30-something million budget.
Right.
I think that towns try and put them in such a way sometimes so as to facilitate discussion by the most number of people. Sometimes it's a little more random, but a lot of the routine articles, towns try and get out of the way up front. Our town also employs a potential consent, what we call a consent calendar.
Yes, right. Oh, right.
Where you can group a bunch of routine every year articles into one and have a one vote right up front, so that happens sometimes. Sometimes zoning bylaws are considered in a cluster, as well as Community Preservation Act articles, more in a cluster, just because while you're in the flow of zoning, you kind of stay in the flow of zoning or community preservation. That's usual, but there could be any other factors.
Now, a lot of people talk, concerned about the poor attendance. And I know for myself, I know that I make sure I have my knitting with me, because I find a lot of it hard to listen to and maybe a little confusing or over my head or what have you. But what do you, is the moderator, what does the moderator have to do with getting people in there? Or do you think it has to do with maybe the moderator's style or?
Well, I mean, a number of people impact how much attendance there is, including most particularly the people who get a chance to vote. These are important things. It's the oldest form of democracy. And it's the one time a year we get together. We're voting on $33 million budgets. And so people should want to go. But I do think the moderator has a role. 2 moderators ago, Dan Winslow, who is very much took a very populist approach to it. Yeah. He tried some very old school techniques, spaghetti dinners, and it helps. Now, certainly if there's a juicy item on a town meeting warrant, a big zoning bylaw or school construction, you're going to get people out. It's going to happen. But if it's a more mundane thing, it's a little harder. I think the moderator can be instrumental in having information sessions, perhaps. In some of my towns where I train moderators, they have an open meeting a couple weeks before town meeting to discuss things. That's helpful sometimes. But the selectmen have a role too. Everyone should try and encourage their friends and neighbors and fellow voters, or your fellow churchgoers, or whatever they may be. Go to town meeting. It's important.
And I know I've often seen people come in en masse for a particular question.
And then leave right after. Yes. It happens. It's unfortunate.
And I seem to remember when I lived in Medfield that what they did was they scrambled. The reason I asked about the order was I guess people were watching on public access to see where they'd gotten and then run in.
And then running in.
And so I think what they did was they I don't know whether they, 1 year or a couple, they changed the order all around once they got there.
Medfield's a little unique. First of all, Medfield gets very good attendance.
Oh, yes.
And they also have a lot of overrides. They pass overrides a lot. And when you're going to do an override, you're going to get people interested in town meeting, pro or con. And it's some of the most divisive and heavily debated issues that you can have. So I think people are very interested in town meeting there. But I should dispel something about our town meeting. I wish that we had way more attendance at our town meeting. I'm going to the Chatham town meeting in a couple weeks where I'm town council. There will be 600 people there. Oh. Well, but Chatham is also a community of a lot of retirees, so it's hard when you work all day to then have dinner and want to go back out to town meeting. And what's the population
of Chatham?
Oh, smaller than us.
Yes, yes, yeah.
But our town meeting is not poorly attended. Our town meeting, I represent some towns where you get 60 people.
Really?
Towns the same size. That's unfortunate. We do okay. We could do better, but we actually do okay. I'd like to see new faces. Everyone would like to see new faces. Everyone should be interested in going. It's not in the cards. People are very busy with their kids, with their work, with their job, with everything. It's hard, but we actually do pretty well. I'd like to do better. I'd do my part to help us do better, but it's hard.
Now, what is the process? Which process, or what is the process called that regulates who speaks when and the order of business?
It's the moderator.
No. I mean, with the system. I mean, we had said it was not Robert's rules. What is it called?
But by bylaw, there's really 2 forms of parliamentary procedure that govern. Well, there's technically 3. Towns choose either formally or informally on what type of parliamentary procedure. That's the motions and the seconds the reconsideration and amendments, all that gobbledygook that we all hear and confuses us at town meetings. There's Robert's Rules of Order, which is a very old, kind of nationwide, worldwide form of parliamentary procedure that has certain rules. Some towns have adopted that as the official set of rules. Some towns don't adopt anything and let the moderator just adopt his own set, and the moderator may use Robert's. Many towns in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is unique, use a book called Town Meeting Time. And by our bylaw, town meeting time is the official guidebook for parliamentary procedure. So any rules on motions to amend and the order of discussion and motions to substitute and lay on the table and adjourn and continue and all those things come out of town meeting time. But it's still important to know that under the cases, which go back to the 1600s involving town meeting and moderators, that regardless of what set of rules you use, it's really the moderator that has the responsibility for making sure that things go forward in an orderly, fair way. So if a moderator decides to veer from town meeting time or Robert's rules because he feels that that's what has to be done to make it an orderly and fair debate, he's allowed to do that.
Oh, okay.
Or she. And they can do that within reason. You're supposed to stick to the script a little bit, and a moderator should never be the subject of attention, so to speak. It should be the people who get a chance to speak. But it's a moderator's world. They're the chairman of the meeting. They're the MC of the meeting. So they're the one that really has to keep things moving. So, but we use town meeting time here generally.
So it would, well, obviously it would be their discretion if somebody were, I don't know, causing a fuss. But I mean, is it also within their discretion if they feel someone has had too much to say? I know at the microphones and I was going to talk about that also, there's a time limit.
Well,
is there 5 minutes and 3?
We have a discretionary time limit, which is a 5 and a 3 per discussion, unless you get permission from the moderator to give a big presentation, which happens at that pre-town meeting organizational meeting that we talked about. And then there's a limit of 2 times speaking per person.
Per issue, per article.
Per article. But in that bylaw that we have, there's the power of the moderator to allow people to speak more than that. It's still at the moderator's discretion. The moderator can shut you off after 2 times at the mic and can shut you off after 3 or 5 minutes, but they don't have to. If I felt, let's say you and I were on opposite sides of an issue and we were bandying things back and forth. You spoke, and then I spoke, and then you spoke again, and then I spoke again, and you felt that I brought something up that you really wanted to talk about and wanted to speak a 3rd time.
Oh, okay.
And if you raise your hand and say, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to speak about this, some might say, well, you already spoke twice, you're out, you're gone, go sit down. But if I, as the moderator, felt that there was still something more for you to say, or that I had brought up something additional that you really needed to comment on, I have the power to say, no, go ahead. I think it's important that town meeting hear this.
Or conversely, if you did have a bias, a personal bias, you would say no. I mean, I know they're not
the
supposed.
moderator?
Yeah.
Oh, I would.
You're not supposed to.
Regardless
But I mean,
of of personal bias, I certainly would never have a personal bias toward.
But I didn't mean you, but I mean it's out there for.
It is, but I
moderator.
certainly, and I've been at town meeting a lot, and I've taken positions on certain things. But as a moderator, it would be up to me not to take a position on any particular article. Moderators do have the power to break ties, but they rarely exercise that. That's another issue. My feeling is that if the issue, again, the you, me type of debate happened, and I felt that the conversation was done, and you were just trying to get the last word.
Yeah.
I would say, look, I think we've heard enough. I'd like to hear someone else on this.
Okay.
So if things are getting repetitive,
I see.
You got to move things on. Again, one of the reasons why some people don't go to town meeting is because sometimes it takes 3 or 4 nights.
Yes, right.
And while I think that it's up to a moderator to balance, has everyone said their piece? Because everyone is guaranteed their right to speak with, we have to get the business of the town done. Mm-hmm. So it's important to balance carefully your right to speak at town meeting with the need to kind of finish up the town's business.
Right.
And the moderator sometimes has to make some tough calls there. I think we've heard enough here. Mm-hmm. Or you've already spoken twice, I'd like to hear someone else on the same subject. Or entertaining a motion to what we call the question, or move the question, which is to move directly to the actual vote itself.
No, because I was thinking about that because I mean I know that you're supposed to speak to the moderator when you're at those microphones.
Can only.
You can only. But you will if you hear something else that piques your interest, or you know something is said as we were just talking about, then I imagine you would want to come back because it could modify your argument by what you just. Now tell me about those microphones. Was there recently and I've asked all the candidates. Was there recently some issue about the microphones, or some sort of were the microphones changed in some way? The use of the microphones. There's three.
There's
a question and
there's a
yes
question in the middle, and a red for no or con votes, and a green for yes or yes or approve votes. 2 moderators ago, Dan Winslow adopted the red, green, and question microphones, and I think Dan's intentions were altruistic. I think what Dan was interested in doing was making sure that there was an orderly debate and that he could measure who was on each side, so he gave equal time to each side. I think it was...
and that was the moderator's call?
Yes,
Did he
a
have
moderator
to get that approved
can do
by
that.
the selectmen?
No, that's his call, it's his meeting. And I think it was very well intentioned on Dan's part. Cece carried on that practice through her tenure as a moderator. I think that some people, the way it's evolved is some people get concerned that they get labeled as being anti all the time because they tend to show up at the red mic too often, and they don't want to be labeled as a naysayer. And I can understand why there would be that kind of stigma. So I think that some people like the red, green, and question mics. I think that they're well-intentioned. I think that some people dislike them. If I were moderator, I would not have a red, green, or a question mic. I would let anyone go to whichever mic was closest to them. And if I felt that the people who were in favor of an article were dominating discussion, I would ask, is there anyone that would like to speak for the contrary proposition or against this article, and try and measure it that way?
Because if you have people lining up at one mic, it's possible you could have a whole bunch of people.
It's possible
being
that
pro,
everyone...
and then the con doesn't get to make their point.
It's possible that everyone's in favor and that they all want to speak in favor and no one wants to get up and speak con. I'm concerned about a town meeting that might have the effect of stigmatizing people or putting people into camps. Town meeting is a community-based event. People should feel comfortable going there. And again, I don't think that either Cece or Dan had any ill will whatsoever. I think that they're both excellent moderators. I think they both did a great job. I think their heart was in the right place on the use of those microphones. And I think in some part, they were effective on getting debate moving in an orderly fashion. But the last thing I would ever want to see at town meeting is someone saying, well, I don't want to get up to the mic because people are always thinking that I'm a Debbie Downer or something. Because I want people to speak at town meeting. I want people to feel free to get up and say whatever they want. I don't want people to feel that they have a label as either being a yes man or a no man. And I think that that's important.
So there'd be more than one mic, but it wouldn't be a yes or no designation. You would just go to the mic that was closest to you, and then you would rotate between the mics.
Well, rotate or, whoever comes up next, you try and keep an eye on who was next speaking.
Right.
And you try and let people have their say, whichever, and occasionally I'd ask a question, is anyone want to speak on this issue or that issue on the opposite side? And if someone wants to, they do. I'd let them maybe jump ahead. Again, it's the moderator's show, so to speak, on that.
Did you have, in your experience, were there any times when you were training people that you felt somebody wasn't suited to this?
To be a moderator?
Yeah.
Boy, I should keep my peace on that one. I've worked with...
you would have not who, but I mean...
No, I've worked with probably dozens and dozens of moderators, some clunkers out there, some fabulous and great moderators. I've lectured to moderators associations before, I've trained, I've done seminars. There are some really fabulous moderators out there who've done it for 50 years. There are some clunkers out there.
I wasn't asking for who, but I mean, is there a type of person that you feel might be ill-suited for this?
No.
Or that you've encountered people that...
Certainly someone who is impatient is probably not a great thing. But I think a moderator could come from any walk of life, any personality. They could be lively and vivacious and funny, or they could be more stoic. As long as they run a meeting that people want to go to and feel comfortable expressing their opinion, and as long as they can help conduct the town's business, and kind of a orderly fashion, they're a good moderator.
And not get lost in details.
And not, I mean, some details are important.
Well, right.
But, you know,
But it does need to be moved.
As you can tell, I have no problem talking. So I will probably speak a little bit, not about the merits of the article, but I don't mind engaging someone and saying, hey, do you have something else to say, or cracking a joke or something else like that. There's other moderators who are very quiet, but no less effective. And it's different strokes for different folks. If it were, and towns are different. Some towns want a lively town meeting. Some towns just want to get in and get out. And so if it suits your town and it works and people go to town meeting and say afterwards that was a worthwhile experience, then that's a good moderator.
I know Frank put on a pretty good show.
Frank was great. Frank was great. And with Frank, it wasn't even so much the rules as the fact that he just knew how to run the meeting. He did let debate go on sometimes in a way that some people said, wow, we're really talking this one to death. But you know what? Frank had control of that meeting. He was respected. He was well liked.
Oh, yeah.
People liked going to town meeting. He was a funny guy in his own way.
And he was kind of a larger than life figure.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
knew
was.
just
He
about
was terrific.
everybody. And I know when I had first moved here, the train whistle was still, and of course he had gotten he'd gotten it stopped. A law against it was passed, but at my crossing, they hadn't done this. They didn't want to do the speed thing because of the big dig. They didn't have the money.
Right.
Blah blah blah. And just to make a long story, I was in the house for about 3 or 4 weeks because I had the measles when I was 48 years old. When I came out that first day, I see the sign. And I tried to get the sign. And I called, and I don't know who. He would never tell me who he talked to or what he said, that he got that sign outside of my house. I'm telling you, he was
terrific. I mean, and I represent a lot of towns that have long-standing 20, 30-year moderators, and they are institutions. And they become a part of the fabric of municipal governance in that town, even though it's really just once or twice a year that they appear and let themselves be seen. When town meeting is something that people look forward to, and they look forward to it to see this cool old guy or cool young guy or gal, then that's a good moderator. And Frank was like that.
Yeah, he was. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of State and Local. We're going to be continuing with interviews. The election is May 6th, and town meeting is May 13th. As we were saying here tonight, hopefully you'll be attending the town meeting. So thank you for watching. I'm Anne Marie Battistone, and this is Norfolk Public Access.